that the U.S. public and the international public are the ones that least are informed in this situation of Venezuela. In Venezuela, we are very informed, but outside Venezuela, it's not very clear. I will try to explain it. I will present the official stance of the Venezuelan government, and Mr. Tai will explain the position, the statement from the activists that are at the moment in the embassy.
On May the 30th, 2019, a very serious incident occurred at the embassy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in Washington, D.C. U.S. authorities tried to forcibly evict a group of individuals who were peacefully staying in the facilities with the full authorization of our government in order to prevent the illegal assault of the premise by violent groups, supporters of the coup d'etat that took place last April the 30th in Venezuela. The objective of the embassy protectors was not to remain as permanent tenants of the diplomatic headquarters, as had been falsely argued for their illegal and forced evacuation. Their goal was to avoid the forceful takeover of the embassy, just as it took place in the two diplomatic premises, namely the headquarters of the former military attaché offices in Washington and the headquarters of the former consulate in New York, both of which were taken over by violent groups with the complicity of the U.S. authorities. Theirs was a preventive action with two additional purposes. Firstly, to inform the public opinion about the abuses committed against the diplomatic headquarters of our republic, and second, to promote respect for international law by the two countries through an agreement that would allow for the peaceful solution of this situation. This type of situation should be resolved by appointing third states with protecting powers in order to maintain the integrity of the diplomatic headquarters. Article 45 of the Vienna Convention states that even in cases of severance of diplomatic relations, the receiving state shall be obliged to respect and protect the premises of the mission. This is only possible through respect for the principle of immunity. For otherwise, if a government uses its territory, paid and protected agents to occupy and violate the diplomatic offices of other governments, the provisions of the convention would be shattered, and all diplomatic offices in the world would be in danger. So our position is simply that we demand and stand for respect of international law and Vienna Convention, which have been violated already in our premises here in the consulate in New York and in the military attaché office in Washington. And they are trying again violently to take over our premises in Washington. And this is a massive violation, not just of Venezuelan rights, but of the rights of all diplomats around the world to work with respect to their physical and moral, I would say also, integrity, in the sense that there is no way that the government of the United States of America can choose who is the right and lawful authority of Venezuela. They can recognize whoever they want, but they cannot designate who is the rightful government in Venezuela, as they are trying to do by changing the facilities and premises of our diplomatic headquarters here to a coup d'etat group. I'm going just to say here, because I think more important than my opinion today is their point of view, so I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Tai Barry. Thank you.
Well, as the Honorable Representative of Venezuela just said, our concerns are very easy to understand. One is the Charter of the United Nations is being violated every single day that the government of the United States tries to recognize someone else to take control on the embassy. We recognize the Vienna Treaty of 1961 that says that the country, even if it's having a problem with the country of that's hosting it, the property that this embassy is sovereign to the country of Venezuela. We went into the embassy of Venezuela recognizing that there could possibly be a war over an embassy. If the embassy in Washington, D.C. is taken, what says that the embassy in Venezuela can't be, the American embassy in Venezuela can't be taken, which sets a pretext for war. The administration in the United States is violating not only UN Charter, but I'm going to be very clear. If you come to the embassy of Venezuela in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., you will see that the United States, our local police departments in Washington, D.C., of which I am a resident, are violating our local laws. They're allowing gangs to beat on us, throw things at us, attack us, rip our hair out of our head. They've allowed gangs to take sledgehammers to the doors of the sovereign protected state building of Venezuela. We've had State Department police constantly there for weeks on end, supposedly to protect the building. Windows have been broken. People have been crawling through spaces to try and get inside. We had our space in front that we had for a month where we did daily protests. When these radical groups of violent Venezuelans, so-called Venezuelans, I don't believe they're all Venezuelan. We know that there are many Cubans in there, Cuban Americans and Nicaraguan Americans, who are extremely violent. I myself was beaten, and in the course of being beaten while trying to set up the very same tents that they had multiples of, I was arrested, spent 56 hours in jail for doing the exact same behavior, only being attacked by it. We, the Embassy Protectors Cooperative, have never laid one hand on any of the violent reactionary Venezuelans, so-called Venezuelans, are in front of these buildings. We have been attacked. People have been sleeping inside the embassy, of which I was sleeping in the embassy for a while. They're sleeping in one single room out of fear. They use sound devices. I am 62 years old. I've had sirens put to my head for 10 minutes, more, for hours, at decibels of 111 decibels. That can make me deaf in years to come. But I am there because I strongly believe in the rights of Venezuela. I also strongly believe in the rights of Americans to use our First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. And I also, as an activist, as a pacifist, for many, many decades now, I realize the pretext of war is right there. We have a warmonger in the White House named John Bolton. Now I'm separating him from our president, who seems to take on actions that are totally illegal all the time. But this particular action is a precept for war. Venezuela has the right to have its own building. There are rules that apply to many countries. There are many embassies in Washington, D.C. that are under protective status. A third country comes in, many times it's Sweden or Switzerland or countries like this, and they protect the sanctity, the sovereignty of the building until whatever problem that the United States is having with the other country can be resolved. The United Nations needs to step forward. There needs to be unity. We can never allow the United States of America, which has a great number of embassies in Washington, D.C., to forcefully take over an embassy. The other day, they put out a so-called eviction notice with no signature, no seal, no statement of what department this came from. The municipal police, which have no authority in this matter, read out an eviction order saying some guy named Vecchio is telling us that we can't be in a building that we were invited into and have been living there for many months. We reject Vecchio. We reject his call to leave the building. We will stay there until a protective status has been made for the Venezuelan embassy, and the police stand down. We have had multiple arrests. There have been very few arrests on the other side. We've had tens. We've had people brutalized, women, old, elderly. There was a 78-year-old man. I'm sure you all read the story of a woman that said that she was pregnant. I was there that night. We went around the corner. It was a 78-year-old man who was bringing toothbrushes to people that he loved. He was bringing them toothbrushes because they don't have toothbrushes. We can't get food into that building. We have people we love, people we've marched with, people that we've been with for years, people that we were in these buildings with for years. All we ask is that they have food until a resolution is taking place. We're not allowed to bring medicine. The elderly that were inside that building were asked to leave. Were forced to leave by our own people, not forced, asked to leave, because they were getting sicker and sicker, because they didn't have their medicines. And this all because of Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State of the United States, and John Bolton. And somehow they have convinced, and there will be multiple lawsuits, I guarantee you, against the Secret Service of the United States of America, who have been acting as agents for the coup government of Guaido and this Vecchio guy. It is wrong. And now, not only that, is I'm a taxpayer in the District of Columbia. My tax dollars are going to pay for municipal police because the secret police realize they have huge lawsuits on their hand. And not only that, is they brutalize people. They put people in hospital. They bloodied people. They're going to have multiple lawsuits after this, and they know that. And so they left the scene and left it to the municipal police. Municipal police have nothing to do with a diplomatic mission in Washington, D.C. We've done this many times. We went to the military attaché office when that was also taken up by Mr. Vecchio, and the Secret Service was there. A woman in her 60s was hit, beaten by these radical Guaido people that come to the embassy. There's videotapes of all these things online. Anyone can access them. You go to Popular Resistance, you go to Code Pink, you go to Answer Coalition, and you will see all these videos. And not only that, they're out there. My lawyer for my case already has seen 10. She goes, there's no way they can do anything to you. I know that. But these are their tactics, to put the people that are organizing and trying to help stop a conflict in Venezuela. Civil war, intervention by the United States militarily in Venezuela is possible. And it will mean the death of many people. We're trying to stop that. And all it takes is sitting down at the table of great men like this, with great men in the United States, that can work out a reasonable situation where a third country can come in, take over the embassy, take control, just like there are many, Cuba, Iran, I can name others, North Korea. There's many in Washington, D.C. that sit idle, and there are protectorate countries. We want that same status for Venezuela until an agreement can be worked out where Venezuela can rightfully retain sovereignty over their mission in Washington, D.C. One last statement. The group that this Mr. Vecchio and Mr. Guaido, if they took over the embassy, there's many of these radical Venezuelans screaming and yelling and hitting people in front of the embassy, holding up passports saying, I want to renew my passport. There is absolutely nothing diplomatically that Vecchio or Guaido or anybody else they send into that building can do. They can't issue passports. They can't issue visas. If somebody, God forbid, a Venezuelan dies in this country and they want the body removed, the Venezuelan embassy will be unable to help them because they have no representation in Caracas, where the capital of Venezuela is. So for them to say that they're on the right side is absolutely false. This is a coup and nothing but a coup. And we will maintain our presence in this building until the sovereignty of Venezuela is recognized.
James Bays from Al Jazeera. Thank you on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association for doing this. Can I ask the ambassador, there's some follow-up points from the gentleman from Code Pink that I'd like to put to the ambassador. Have you requested, I don't quite know how the Vienna Treaty works, have you requested a country to act as your protecting power in Washington under the treaty? Is there any recourse for you, any tribunal, any international court that you can go to? Would you consider taking this perhaps to the UN General Assembly to make a complaint? And if I can add one other point from what the gentleman said there, he referred to John Bolton. Clearly the US is involved in a war of words with your country. There seem to be some similarities to perhaps the situation between the US and Iran. Do you see similarities?
Yes, thank you very much for those questions. The first one, of course we have tried over and over to talk to the US authorities and to reach what the Vienna Convention establishes as the way forward to resolve this matter, which is assigning a protective power on both sides. And I absolutely know that the United States is appointing the Swiss government as the protective power in Caracas, and we are respecting that, but we also need that they accept our protective power. We are proposing Turkey, for example. I don't know if that particular detail has been worked out, but so far the behavior and answer of the US government is the following. They behave towards us as if there was the case of a severance of relations, and we are breaking relations, international relations. In those cases, they appoint a protective power, fair enough. But when we ask exactly for the same reciprocity, they say, no, we don't recognize you. We recognize the other guy. So, which is ridiculous. They pretend that we will behave as in the case of severance of international relations in Caracas, but they will behave in Washington otherwise, which is ridiculous. Reciprocity is the one sacred principle of international relations. You do as you are done. My point is, there is a practice, this is a tradition of working this thing out, and this is our proposal. Let's appoint any government that you choose. If you don't want Turkey, let's go for another. But that's the actual and the historical way of solving it and fixing this matter. But as Taik said, you also said it. There was a crisis in Iran, and in Iran there were locals taking over the American embassy. If the American embassy in Washington or the US government in Washington allows people of their choosing to take over violently our headquarters, our premises, well, that will open the door for everyone around the world. They are putting at risk or at peril every single diplomat around the world, not just Venezuelans or Americans. That would be an accepted practice by everyone, that we choose the opposition side of any political situation in any government. All governments in the world have a position. So you will choose your friends and send them over as a mob to take over the place. It's very dangerous. It's dangerous for all diplomats around the world. That's why we think that the United Nations is the right place to debate this issue. So where should we go? The General Assembly is one place. The International Court of Justice is another place. But we think that the sensible people, the reasonable people at the State Department, even in the Trump's government, should think twice. They are not just fighting Venezuela, they are putting at risk their own people around the world. Everybody's seeing, watching what's going on.
Volviendo al punto que usted estaba mencionando.
Back to the point, could you tell us in Spanish what is the proposal you've asked Turkey, to ask the U.S. that Turkey becomes the third-party state that will take over the embassy to protect it? And regarding the seizure of the state assets, today it was announced that flights to Venezuela were canceled from the U.S. What's the reaction of the Venezuelan government? Will we use other airlines, Chinese, Russian, Turkish? Contact group was flying to Caracas to talk with the government. with Nicolás Maduro's government. How do you think this could advance? As because in the last meeting with the Grupo Lima, they were saying they were going to meet with a contact group, and Cuba would be called to start a possible negotiation. Yeah, we'll start with the last one. The contact group is doing their work around the world, and is coming now to talk in Venezuela. Now, what I can assure you is that the Group of Lima does not serve as any purpose. There, we don't have any intention to speak with them, with a group that's basically supporting a coup and in their last statement in their point 14, the Colombian government introduced through a backdoor way a very dangerous statement, as they put the 10 countries to say, telling them that they were convinced that the ELN, which is a guerrilla group in Colombia, which has been going on for 60 years fighting in Colombia, and just in case they attacked in the Ecuador border, because it has nothing to do with us. It's 1,500 kilometers on the other side. They're saying that has to do with us, and that the ELN is an armed group from Venezuela. They've been saying this for 8 months. In September of last month, Carlos Trujillo, ambassador, the OEA ambassador, in a radio show, who I cited afterwards, that Maduro was leaving because military Colombian forces were gonna attack him, because ELN was gonna be the cause of this military fight. He said this as in a magic foreboding. Now the government of Colombia has had a 2-week campaign talking every day, every 24 hours, that ELN fighting is our fault. And how can I explain, if how can we explain the problem from the 60 years past of ELN and the latest attack in the border of Ecuador? With the matter of airlines, it's very grave. I just heard a couple of hours ago. It's part of the blockade, and I'll tell you one thing. It's very dangerous, because they're trying to kill the Venezuelan people by economic sanctions, by blocking food, medicines, even flights. Do you know who's going to be affected firstly by this? The Venezuelans that are living in the south of Florida, because I don't know how they're going to do now. Because the problem is that the people are taking these sort of decisions. Mr. Bolton and Mauricio Claverde at the security agency, they're very happy to see how the Venezuelan people suffer. They're tricking the U.S. people, manufacturing a war, and as zombies, they're going to war without realizing that what they want are taking measures never seen before. In the history of Venezuela, there's never been something as serious as this. There's no records. What sick mind and criminal mind could come up with something so brutal as this? But they've normalized this as something traditional, something they do every day. The last question regarding the embassy, as I said it in English, I'll say it now in Spanish. This can only be resolved. This is not the first time something like this happens. Countries break diplomatic relations. Every country has the diplomatic mission. The Article 45 says that even in case of war, diplomatic buildings have to be protected by the host country, even if if anyone in war. We're not in war, and we don't want a war. Well, my purpose here is to avoid a war. Part of the Code Pink's aim is to avoid a war. We don't want a war with no one. We haven't had a war in more than 200 years. The U.S. has had, in the last 200 years, the U.S. has had only 16 years without wars. And us, in 200 years, we've never had a war. Do we want a war with the U.S.? No, crazy. It would make no sense. But what I think that this power-seeking people are pushing for a war, and their problem in the continent, something is never seen before. Let's agree upon a third-party state that protects the embassy, as it's been done before. and not violate international law, because they're putting their diplomatic mission in danger in other countries. Because in other parts of the world, crazy people like the crazy people in Washington might be saying, if the Guaidó people can do it, we can do it in another part of the world. Look at the danger for a little bit of power. To steal the Venezuelan oil, which we could work with, as we've done for the over 100 years, with a war and invasions. Mr. Ambassador, what can you comment the words of Mike Pence that he said in the Security Council?
Going back to your own country, I'll say that in English. Mr. Ambassador, can you make any comments about the Vice President's comments in the Security Council? You shouldn't be here. Please go home.
Thank you. Let me answer in English then. The idea is that the Vice President, as Mr. Bolton also think, that as the United Nations are placed in New York, the United Nations belong to the United States, which is a massive mistake. The United Nations belongs to the world. So this is not the club of friends of the United States. We are not here because they like us. We are here for, exercising our rights, but more working to stop the aggression of the United States against our country. So this strange idea that they choose and pick who stays here because they think that this place belongs to us is absolutely mistaken. And it's full of, another example of the arrogance, hubris, also is said in English, arrogance, hubris, and I would say excess in their own thinking that they are so exceptional, they can break international law as they like. Even more, they can force other countries to break the international law, which is absolutely dangerous. It's not only ridiculous, it's dangerous. At the back, and then I will...
Yes. Mr. Ambassador, this is Stefano Vaccara, Radio Radicale in Rome, La Voce di New York. And this is also a question about Washington. You have an embassy, and now you're saying the United States wants to break the rules. Who is helping you, and of course not in the administration, but in Congress? Do you have anyone, in this moment, the Maduro government has any relations, anyone that is in contact, that you can be in contact in Congress that is acting differently, that maybe has a different approach, and you think that you can, find the solution?
Listen, I'm not going to name friends in Congress, but I'm sure, knowing this country for a long time, that even in Congress, the division regarding Venezuela is not between Democrats and Republicans. My experience tells me that the division is between pro-war and pro-peace. And you can find pro-peace people in all places. And we want to work with pro-peace people. I know soldiers, former CIA agents, former veterans, people that lead all their lives working with wars and with violence, and they don't agree with what's going on now. And on the contrary, I know people who never had touched a weapon, and they are so eager to go and kill Venezuelans. Even the very same puppet they got there, he just signed a letter to send his representative here, the same Mr. Vecchio, to talk to the chief of the South Command in order to plan an invasion to Venezuela, which, by the way, was also discussed on a meeting on the 10th of April in one think tank, which is the propaganda organ of the superpowers, which is the Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington. 40 people met there on the 10th of April to discuss ways to wage war on Venezuela. And you know who was there? The ambassador of Colombia, the ambassador of Brazil, the head of the USAID, which supposedly is a humanitarian agency of the American government, of the US government. All these strange people, along with 10 Venezuelans, including Mr. Vecchio, were there planning to kill Venezuelans. And that's why we need to talk to all reasonable people, sensible people. Let's stop this madness.
Can I add something?
Yes, he wants to say something.
So, Just so you know, yesterday in Santa Monica, California, Tulsi Gabbard spoke out and said, we need to have dialogue. We do need to have dialogue. There are individuals that we can have dialogue with. We just can't have dialogue with people who are throwing things at you, hitting you with sticks, tearing the hair out of your head. You need to have sensible people come to a sensible place and have diplomacy. I can't stress anymore. One of the things we talked about when we first went into the embassy there was what's going to happen to our embassies around the world? What's going to happen to American embassies? Because I travel around the world. I count on American embassies. What happens if any other country that has a problem with the United States can just shut it down and I no longer can use it? This is just not okay. We have a State Department that's meant to do dialogue and diplomacy, not continue with war. And I'm going to stress one again, that we're on the right. We went in front of the OAS. The OAS, in its charter, is not allowed to kick Venezuela out. You just have to read it. It says if you're having conflict, if the OAS is having conflict with one state, it can't kick that state out. So and you talk about the Lima Group. Lima Group, why don't I organize my own Lima Group and decide who can stay and who can go? It's like, it's a little like the Security Council in the United Nations, where just five different individuals decide everything for everybody else. This is not okay. We need to protect this embassy, and we will.